Welcome back to the In the Scope podcast with your boy Joshua M. Hicks, senior writer for War Media. Earlier we had the great Jarrett Payton, JP, on the show talking about Bears, but he does have a coworker that's pretty cool people from what I know. And and just to say he has his expertise as well. And this guy is one of the greatest people for me just because he really helped me in starting not just my podcast per se, but being on when CLTV was around Sports Feed, which I miss so dearly. CLTV was such a great platform, but even with what he's doing with that, being the sports reporter and sports anchor for GN, and even being one of the co-hosts for GN's new show, GN Sports TV, he's doing big things in the industry, and also has been a great friend and mentor in the industry for me as well. I currently have on the show a great friend, Josh Frydman. As Josh has got to stick together, right? So
Hey, Josh's man, one for all for one.
exactly. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Hey, thanks for the introduction. Really kind words, and I got to follow up JP. So we'll see how that goes. I get to see him most of the time at work. So, but yeah, we do miss CLTV. I'll echo that statement. It's been a little over a year now since, unfortunately, the network folded, and so did Sports Feed. But we had a good 4.5 year run. I know you and the Regal Radio guys, D and Davis, and so many others have been a huge supporters of ours, and we got to have you guys on the show a bunch. So it was a lot of fun while it lasted, but we all move forward, and doing some great stuff with WGN. So everything's good.
Yeah, most definitely, man. And I'm obviously glad and thankful for you to come on my podcast and on my show. It was long overdue,
Yeah.
and I'm glad to be able to make that happen. So let's just jump right on in, because like I told Jared, man, these Bears, I don't know. You got to help explain this to me, because you have Ted Phillips, McCaskies, Ryan Pace, Matt Nagy, all pretty much coming out here giving all types of random statements that, quite frankly, don't flow together. It doesn't make sense. They're all coming back. Like, explain to me, what was it like? Because I assume you listened and was part of that press conference,
Oh
correct?
yeah, I had to listen to all. I think it was 87 minutes in all, and Josh, we've heard some really rough press conferences over the years in Chicago sports. Of course, some Garpax classics, and name your team, right? But this is going to go down as one of the worst ones for sure, just because it was so filled with non-substantive BS. It was just like, you know what? Yeah, we're not good enough. Yeah, we don't have the quarterback. We like each other. It's good enough for us. And, Ryan Pace said 6 years here, but we still want to learn more about him. And it's like, what have you been doing the last couple of years? What have you been doing this season? Because if you're really evaluating from an objective perspective, and obviously it's not objective, because even George McCaskey said, look, he reports to the board of directors and to the people that he's the chairman. Of course, like, he's not going to get a realistic impression of the team based on people that are close to him and don't want to probably upset him. And yes, he said he got help from, or got advice from, other owners like Michael Bidwell of the Cardinals and the Rooney and the Morrow family. What are other owners going to tell him, again, objectively about the team? They're probably like, yeah, Trubisky, he's good. Keep him. Yeah, Nagy, you guys are doing great. It's like, come on. So the whole process was flawed. And look, I'm not surprised they kept Matt Nagy. I'm a little more surprised they kept Ryan Pace, but not shocked. I am most disappointed they didn't bring in, or say they're going to bring in, a president of football operations, because Ted Phillips has been here for 21 years. And yes, they say he is on the business side. And George tried to say yesterday, look, he doesn't meddle in the football operations, but you don't have anybody that oversees Ryan. And even if you like Ryan as a guy and you've liked some of his recent draft picks, they pointed out Darnell Mooney. Yeah, great, good find. But what about Anthony Miller? Where's he been? Obviously, the quarterback position hasn't worked out. So you have as many, if not more, misses than hits. And so if you're trying to justify bringing Ryan Pace back, maybe it's the contract, maybe it's the money too. But look, get somebody else in here for another perspective that you're actually putting on payroll and have as an overseer for Ryan Pace that can push Ted Phillips aside even more to make sure that you are running the best football program you can.
Very well said. Because I mean, because especially with Mitch, like, that was such a debacle. I mean, at the end of the day, Mitch just was not the guy. And even at the draft, the functions that we took to get him, like we literally traded up one spot. Like, were we that afraid that someone was going to jump the gun to get this guy? Um, you
Yeah.
know, like some of these moves with Ryan Pace that he's done, you definitely can't go against what he's done later in the draft with drafting guys like Darnell Mooney and Tariq Cohen, Jalen Johnson,
Eddie
those type of,
Jackson, who fell off this year, but yeah, he's found some good late picks. You're right.
yeah, especially in the late picks, but those first rounders are killers. And on top of that, I mean, he did build the defensive side. He did bring in Khalil Mack. He did bring in Robert Quinn. But especially as this year, those guys underperformed. And this was an underperforming season. So if you're the Bears, if you're in this front office, obviously we know QB total miss. But what do you do to fit the specific needs? Like, which need would you go for first?
Well, it's got to be quarterback, Josh. And here's the issue that I have too. You are now entrusting Ryan Pace to pick a fourth quarterback, really fifth if you want to go, because you could say Mike Lennon, Mitch Trubisky, Chase Daniel, if you really want to say you paid, $9 million or so as a backup, and then Nick Foles. So you've paid for two to be backups, fine, but really not, because you kind of paid Nick Foles to be a starter, even though he didn't start the season that way. So you really missed on three potential guys you thought could be a starter. Mike Lennon, whether or not you realistically thought that guy could be an NFL starter, you acted like it, you paid him like it, and whether it was this big smoke screen so people wouldn't know that you were going after Trubisky, that was still a blow to your resume, and it didn't work out. So what gives anyone faith that Ryan Pace can pick a quarterback that works out? What he was saying yesterday was the collaboration with Matt Nagy, right? The relationship together, the two minds working together, because that wasn't the case when they drafted Mitch Trubisky. Fine, I get that. But it was the case last year when they went out and they signed Nick Foles, who, from all intents and purposes, was a Nagy guy. They worked together before. He fit the system, and that blew up in their face, even more so because he's on the hook for, I think, $20+ million next year. So Nick Foles is going to be on the roster. I don't think Mitch Trubisky is going to be on the roster. From everything they said yesterday, it seems like they're going to move on, and I think that's the right decision. I like Mitch as a guy. I think he has shown in spurts he could be a capable quarterback. He's more on the Marcus Mariota side of things, though, where you're a top 3, top 2 pick that doesn't pan out in your initial city, and maybe you go get a backup job, get a few looks, and who knows, you have a pretty decent long career as a mix of a backup and a spot starter. Maybe he turns out to be Ryan Tannehill. That's the best case scenario, and that'd be the worst case for Bears fans, or Alex Smith, right? You've seen these comparisons, but those guys had to move on from their initial franchise, work on their success later in their career. Ryan Tannehill obviously brought the team to the AFC Championship game last year. Alex Smith won a division this year with Washington, had success in Kansas City before they brought him home. So it can work out for Mitch Trubisky. I just don't think it's here in Chicago anymore. And then you look at Josh, the options at quarterback. You're drafting 20th, okay? Is Mac Jones going to be there? Is Trey Lance, somebody in the draft, going to fall down? Maybe, maybe not. Do you, again, trade draft capital to move up a couple spots to get your guy? We've seen Ryan Pace has been aggressive. He will do that. But that's also set the Bears back so many years because they've only had 5 or 6 draft picks in some drafts. You traded up to get David Montgomery. You traded up to get Anthony Miller, obviously Mitch Trubisky. So eventually that'll bite you in the butt because now the defense is getting older and you are lacking playmakers. Allen Robinson needs to be re-signed this year. You have a lot of question marks still on the offensive line as much as it did improve down the stretch. So it's not just the quarterback position, but obviously you got to solve that. And I don't have a lot of faith they can.
Well, we know that obviously aside from all the offensive struggles, and for the love of God, me trying to understand why they didn't extend Allen Robinson when they had the chance. That still blows my mind. But you got the defense that's like you said, it's getting older. It's not as up to par as it used to be, and you got Chuck Pagano that just stepped away to retire. So who do you think could be that guy to step in, at least on the defensive side, to really bring this defense back to what it was back when it was on par in 2018?
I don't know if it's going to get back there, Josh, to be honest. That was such a special season. It was the first year the Mac came in, the hype, the enthusiasm, the playmaking. You remember those years? Like they were choreographing their touchdown celebrations, their takeaway celebrations. I was in that locker room every week. It was so much fun because those guys obviously were winning. It helped, but it was this upstart young team. They had so much confidence, bordering on cockiness, and that was okay. It's okay to have in the NFL. That has not happened the last 2 years. And I think the number one thing to me is that team, and you kind of knew it was going to come, had so much takeover or takeaway regression baked in. They had 36 takeaways in 2018. They had 18 this year. They cut it in half. Last year they had 19. So in 1 year, basically, they had almost as many as the last 2 years combined in takeaways. Think about that. You're just not going to be as good of a defense, even if you have the skill position players. If you're not being opportunistic with the takeaways, the sacks, you're not putting enough pressure on the quarterbacks. And we see what the good quarterbacks do to this team. Aaron Rodgers licks them apart. Aside from Deshaun Watson, who obviously is on a terrible team himself, the Bears really didn't do too well against really good quarterbacks. Drew Brees in the playoffs, obviously, too, had his way. It didn't need to go deep or anything. It was nickel and diming them to death with, Deontay Harris. Come on, cover the guy. Michael Thomas being back. So yeah, you look at the defense. Who are the guys you really feel like can still build around? Roquan Smith, to me, he's your number one guy. He's such a stud. Khalil is still playing at a high level, but the numbers haven't been what you would expect and want from his contract. So you got to think about what you mean, what he means to the franchise now in the latter half of his career. Akeem Hicks getting older, still really good, getting older though. Robert Quinn, complete bust. Leonard Floyd, look what he did with the Rams this year. So that was something that blew up in the Bears' face. Kyle Fuller, still a Pro Bowl level player. Eddie Jackson, where has his production been? Watching him play too, it's so different. He's trying to make these huge hits and he's missing tackles. Maybe quarterbacks and offenses are scheming away from him more, but to have no interceptions this year, I know he had a couple that were taken away because of flags. But still, that was really disappointing to me. The guy who you're paying is one of the highest paid safeties in the NFL. So Trevathan, another guy who has aged. It's gotten bad kind of quick. And as far as who's going to take over this job, I think they probably promote from within. Jay Rodgers is a candidate, defensive line coach, maybe Ted Monachino, the outside linebacker coach, because, hearing from beat writers and kind of sensing the whole vibe around this team, what defensive coordinator from outside the organization is going to take this job, knowing it could be a one and done, because Nagy and Pace, they are obviously on thin ice. We know that. And so unless they win next year, it's probably going to be a cleaning house. So defensive coordinators got to think, look, is this a long-term opportunity? Maybe not. So a young upstart guy from outside the organization is probably going to say, I'm going to go elsewhere, take another job, even though there is talent on this defense.
Yeah, very good. Those are all very good points. But at the same time, the mediocrity. That's what kills me with this team is the mediocrity. And you have to wonder who's going to fill these roles effectively, especially with this offseason being so unsure. They made it seem like that Mitch isn't coming back. And since Mitch isn't coming back, you don't have your full faith in Nick Foles, because even Nick Foles started hot, he derailed real quick. And who would you replace as the QB? When I talked to JP about this, I asked him about the idea of do the Bears go literally all in and do everything that they can to get an unhappy Deshaun Watson from Houston right now? Do they actually go after a young guy like that who has the capabilities of a championship quarterback, especially since he has it? Do they fix those? Those amends? Do they make amends on those rights and wrongs and try to get it right and bring in a guy that they should have drafted to basically read the franchise and redirect this thing to another level? Like, do they pull that type of trigger, or do they just try to see what they can get in the free agency market, bearing the fact that, like you mentioned, this draft isn't that predictable to a point where you can get a quarterback like Matt Jones or Trey Lance in the latter part of that first round?
Look, if Deshaun Watson is at all available, you have to make a call, at least. I mean, it's malpractice even to say we're not going to pursue it. I think every team in the league, even the ones that have great quarterbacks, are thinking, well, if Deshaun Watson's available, we have to see, at least make the call, see what the price is. That being said, that is a long shot beyond long shots. I do not think the Texans are going to trade away with a new GM, even if he's unhappy, trade away their franchise quarterback. And let's say they do, the asking price is going to be James Harden-esque. To compare it to an NBA trade we saw last night. 4 first-round picks, probably. We saw 2 for Khalil Mack. So 4 first-round picks plus a quarterback they need as a filler. plus maybe another talent or other picks. It's going to be the biggest haul we've ever seen. That I think that is a pipe dream Bears fans can, dream about, but never really take seriously, because I doubt that would ever happen. So, well, let's talk about realistic options. The draft, and I think maybe, JP said this so many years, and I agree with him. I don't know if he said this on the podcast with you, Josh, but the fact the Bears have not drafted a quarterback outside of Trubisky since Pace has been here is, again, it is just terrible management. Look at the Packers did. They drafted a quarterback in the first round this year, and Aaron Rodgers is the MVP. All right. They're always thinking 2 steps ahead. Great organizations are always thinking about that. They draft quarterbacks in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th rounds, even when they have one, because you don't know when that diamond in the rough is going to appear. You need someone to just have at the ready to mold and to build. That's not a veteran quarterback. That's not Tyler Bray, for Christ's sake. You know what I mean? It's crazy that that's the guy they've had. And if it's because the relationships that he has with the coaches and with Trubisky, that means your coaches aren't good enough if you need another quarterback on staff to be that 3rd, 4th, 5th coach. So if you really think this roster has a chance to win now still, and I am very doubtful of that, if you change a quarterback and you think that's the only thing missing, I would explore a trade for maybe Matt Ryan or Matthew Stafford if the Lions were to do so in the division. And I would probably think that is a little bit of a less likely outcome. But Matt Ryan, he is not a top 10 guy in my mind anymore, but obviously a guy who's taken a team to a quarterback, won an MVP, still can throw the ball, still can make plays. Maybe he needs a change of scenery. The Falcons are a bottom 4 team. If they say, we're going to trade him away, draft a quarterback, what's the asking price? I don't know. And do the Bears want to take on that money as well? They're already pretty up against the cap. They need to move things around. But if you get a proven Pro Bowl level quarterback and you slide him in and you actually give Matt Nagy something to work with, I can see that. I can buy that in. Dak Prescott, again, is probably the guy who I don't think is realistic, because I don't think the Cowboys are trading him, but you make that call. You see what veteran you can win with, and you still draft a quarterback. You still get a guy, maybe it's not the first pick, because you still need offensive linemen, you still need playmakers on both sides of the ball, but you still draft a quarterback in the middle rounds, and you get someone for the long term. But if you really think this roster can win, I would explore the veteran quarterbacks on the market who maybe want out and maybe will be an option via trade. So that, to me, because the free agent market's not great again, and like you said, the draft, who knows what that'll what those guys in the 20th pick range will be like. Even if those guys fall, the likelihood of success is still pretty slim for quarterbacks later than the top 10 in the NFL.
So I want to harp on this just for a little bit, because you definitely mentioned this guy, and that situation that he's dealing with is really up in the air with Dak Prescott. Cowboys, they franchised him this past year. He coming off a brutal, ankle injury to where he had to get surgery. And now Jerry Jones has come out and said, yeah, he has all the leverage, but at the same time, I'm still signing the checks. So is he going to get the money that he's asking for? I don't know. That situation is a unique situation for Dak. You tell it, you put it out there that you really think the Bears should really make a call for Dak?
Oh yeah, they have to, and knowing that it's at least a possibility. And again, I think Jerry Jones is trading away his franchise quarterback. He paid Amari Cooper, he paid Ezekiel Elliott. If you don't pay your quarterback, what are you doing, man? Come on. So again, similar to Deshaun Watson, you make the call, but those two to me would be the longer shots for sure. And I think the more realistic options for veterans that you can maybe trade for, the guys I mentioned. Ryan Fitzpatrick is he's so much fun to watch. He's not a guy that is in the same realm, but look, when he's in games, he plays well and he wins. So if you want a placeholder, maybe he's a guy you bring in. But I would be more interested in seeing what the asking price is for these veteran quarterbacks on bad teams that maybe you can get for a couple years here, and you're going to pay. But if you still believe you're in a win now mode and you need to see if the quarterback's the missing ingredient and the rest of the roster can still win here, then that's worth exploring.
All right, we'll see, man, because that's a pretty sketchy thing when you're talking about certain quarterbacks like that. We'll see. Everybody listening right now, you're listening to WGN Sports anchor, sports reporter, co-host of the GNTV Sports show, Josh Frydman. Josh, let's transition to some Bulls, man, because the Bulls, you know, I think the last time we talked Bulls, at least on the show with you, was the god awful Jim Boylan era. And
Let's not go
now,
back there, Josh. Come on.
right.
Better times ahead. We've moved on.
Right, and we have moved on with our tourist Karnisovas. We moved on with Mark Eversley and the new front office management. We actually got a legit coach now in Billy Donovan, and I'm as as someone that's that covers the Bulls and the NBA. I'm impressed with the Bulls so far. Not obviously losing. We expected that. They're a young team. They got a long new system. They got a long ways to go to develop. But you see growth over time from game to game. We see how Zach LaVine has continued to take that next step as being, even though I do believe he's still like a sidekick option in the offense, he's taken up to that number one option under Billy Donovan pretty well so far. Kobe White is developing in a point guard as more of a point guard per se than just a scoring guard. The addition of Patrick Williams to the draft shocked a lot of people, but dudes is showing very positive signs and a high ceiling. What do you think of this Bulls makeup so far as they played the first few games of the season?
Yeah, I agree. I've been pleasantly surprised, but I think the difference between the Billy Donovan, not only just the product we're seeing, but just the culture and the way the team is run, the way that other teams and other people around the league are taking the Bulls seriously for once. That to me is the biggest difference, because it was always kind of deemed as a joke when Jim Boylan was here, and these were the laughables, really. That's what it was. Now you brought an established coach who has an earned reputation from Oklahoma City from his time at Florida, and you brought in established people to run the show in AK and Eversley, as you mentioned. It's just changed the perception around the Bulls, both in the city, outside the city, in the organization, outside the organization. And that's done wonders. And it's going to take time. It doesn't mean the Bulls are going to make the playoffs this year. I think that was always far-fetched, because this is still a team that is learning all about itself. And the thing you want to see is who on this roster is a guy you can think is going to be on the next winning Bulls team. And to me, the three guys you look at right now, and there are some other pieces, but Kobe White, you look at Patrick Williams, and you look at Zach LaVine, because I don't know if he's a part of this future or not, because he is the guy who you have to ask yourself, right? He's top 5 in the league in scoring. He's your go-to guy, but the team is still not winning, and he has never won in this league, and that's not always been his fault. But is he a guy who you feel like is part of this core, or do you trade him to a contender and you get a haul and you get multiple draft picks and young players back to build around the other core players? Because let's remember, Kobe's 20. Patrick Williams is 19. These guys are going to be around for a long time. Zach's not old, but he's 7 years older than those guys, 6 years older than those guys. So you have to decide, if you're the front office here, who didn't pick any of these guys besides Patrick. They inherited the rest of this roster. Who are the guys you feel like can actually build into a winning team? And Zach still, I love Zach. He's a fun player to watch, great guy to talk to. He's not the most complete player in the NBA, right? He tries hard on defense. It's just not always going to be his forte. He is the guy you want with the ball in your hands at the end of the game. He's not always come up clutch at the end of the game, but he has had a lot of opportunities where he's made those winning shots at the end of the game. But a little bit more consistency out of that. How to match with some of these other guys on the floor. So these are things you want to watch for the next couple of months of Bulls basketball. But the trade deadline, if some team's going to say, hey, Zach LaVine's our missing piece because he can offer 25 points for us, and we're a team that we think can make that jump, you have to listen. You have to listen, because Zach's on the third of his 4-year contract. He's on a very team appropriate deal, very team friendly with the contract he signed, which a lot of fans were skeptical of a couple of years ago. That deal looks great now, 4 for $80. I mean, he is vastly underpaid for his production. So I think you got to explore that. But as far as the way he has worked on the floor, looks good with Kobe. Those two are a lot of fun right now. And Pat Williams, man, look, you're saying, hey, kid, you're 19. These are your first couple weeks in the NBA. Go guard Giannis. Go guard LeBron. Go guard Kawhi. It's trial by fire, and I love it, because you have to get this kid ready to be a potential, where you see the potential in him, which is a star defensive player who can grow offensively. That shot already looks smooth. It looks natural. He looks like he belongs. So the early returns are really good for him.
Yeah, there's been recent comparisons for Patrick Williams as far as they were comparing him to Kawhi.
Yeah,
As
let's not go there yet. Like, I get it. Like he's got the physical makeup, he's got the hands and the arm length, but Kawhi is a top 5 player in the NBA, and we don't want to put those expectations on a kid, right? But it's cool that at least some people are saying, hey, he's got a little baby Kawhi in him.
Yeah, that is true. And I like how I think the biggest thing for me that I'm really gonna pay attention to the most, aside from obviously what the Bulls are gonna do with Larry Marketing, because he asked for an extension, didn't happen. So you got to figure out what they're gonna do with him and figure out the development between him, Wendell Carter Jr., and how that front court looks like. But for me personally, I want to see the development of Kobe White as a point guard. And I think having Mo Cheeks on your bench as the assistant coach, who's a Chicago guy, who's played the position, coached numerous point guards and all-star point level point guards as well, to have that experience and that repertoire on your bench. Obviously, Billy Donovan was a point guard as well and has coached great point guards, but having someone like Mo Cheeks, who's very well respected in the league, to coach Kobe White and show him the ropes as far as how to find that balance of being a scoring point guard as well as a facilitator and a playmaker. I think that's going to be a really big key that's going to help really take Kobe White's game to the next level, especially as the Bulls are looking to him as one of the core foundational players of this team moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, what do you think about Kobe as a true point guard? Do you feel like you need to bring in a better facilitator and have Kobe kind of be like a Ben Gordon type of, weapon off the bench, even, or a guy who just can fill up buckets, but is not going to be that true point guard? He in the West Coast trip, he had what, 6 assists a game. He had a couple double-digit assist games, so he's clearly a talented passer, but it's not there consistently. I'm curious what you think about that.
I I think he is going to be the point guard that could get you 20 a game and average around 6 assists, six, maybe 7, if that. I mean, because I really don't think he's a legit true point guard. You talk about point guards, you're talking about the Chris Pauls, you're talking about those type of point guards where although he does have a connection to Chris Paul, those type of point guards that can actually score the ball, but really actually run an offense. I don't think Kobe White's someone that can run an offense per se consistently, but he can get you buckets, and as long as he can get you at least maybe 5, 6 assists a game, I think you're going to be great. I think you'll be good for the Bulls. They just got to bring in someone that can continue to, move the ball around, or someone that's compatible with his offensive skill set, especially if you're talking about someone where Zach LaVine may or may be he may be or he may not be off the scene.
Yeah, and Kobe right now in his young career, he's very streaky. He hits the ball and some can't miss, and you're like, get Kobe the ball wherever you can, and he's knocking down 3, 4, 5 shots in a row, from 3, mid range. He's getting to the rack. That's fun to watch, but other times it's just not falling for him. Okay, how can you impact the game when that's happening, right? That's the growth for this young kid. How can he, whether it's facilitating, whether it's crashing the boards, because he can rebound pretty well as well. He's got some length too. So how can you find ways when your shot's not falling to impact the game? And so I'm sure Donovan is hammering that home. Mo Cheeks, it's a good point. Just these veteran guys on the bench that are helping him as well from a coaching perspective.
Yeah, and I actually like the transition of Otto Porter. Obviously, Otto Porter can't stay healthy to save his life, but when he is healthy, the fact that they moved him towards the bench to give Patrick Williams that starting position, I thought was actually really big, because the Bulls they don't have a bench. They lack production from the bench. And the fact that Otto Porter can come off the bench, give you some scoring and a level of comfort in that second unit. I think that plays a huge role in the progression of how you're trying to move this team moving forward and what you need to look for moving forward. Obviously, he's on a last bit of his deal. It's not a guarantee he's even going to be here past the trade deadline. But it gives that flexibility at least on your second unit, to help give opportunities like Patrick Williams time to shine and to really grow in the big stages.
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of Otto Porter, going back to his high school days, really. So he grew up in Southeast Missouri, where he used to work. So we didn't overlap, but he came back a few times and got to interview him. They dedicated the high school gym to him. So just kind of a cool connection that I've always just, watched his career, Georgetown, the Wizards, and, obviously with the Bulls. Hasn't panned out. The injuries are a big reason why, because you can see he had that, that game in Washington right earlier in the year. I think it was the Wizards game where he had like 27 points, 30 points. Like he can fill up. Again, he's a good scorer, always been a good shooter, but he can't stay healthy. And that's been the biggest rap on Otto, unfortunately. So yeah, this is probably his last year of that inflated contract. But again, you want that money off the books going forward to start building this team. So that's obviously why this is about the future. You start Patrick Williams here because you want to see, again, throw the kid into the fire. What can you do? And the fact he looks so comfortable and he is so receptive talking to him, receptive about the learning experience. And he is, hey, what are you learning from guarding Giannis? And he's going into detail about it, how you got to use your hands. You can't use your body. His chest is on fire after guarding him. This stuff is so important to the development of a 19-year-old, as we said, the second youngest player in the NBA right now. So, yeah, I'm all for it. And look, for a kid who never even started at Florida State, and that was kind of one of the things that people were skeptical of. Hey, how are we taking a kid in the top 4 who hasn't even started a game? It's not about that. We know it's not about if you start in college, because again, he was super young at Florida State too. They had a really talented team and he was playing the minutes. It wasn't like he was playing 15 minutes a game. He was still playing starters minutes and closing the game. So just because he played a 6th man role in college doesn't mean he can't grow into being more than that in the pros. And we're starting to see that.
Yep. Florida State head coach Leonard Hamilton, legendary who's pretty much bound in the Hall of Fame if he's not in it already. He made that clear. He said that, this guy, even though he wasn't my starter, I had him at the end of the games. He played the minutes. He closed out the deal because of what he brings to the table. And like you mentioned, for us to see that right now and to see glimpses of that, especially in big time moments against the big time superstars, he's slowly but surely taking notice around the league. And players like LeBron James and Kawhi have made it known that, yeah, this is a young guy that the Bulls really, in a way, got right. So with that being said, sticking on Patrick Williams, do you see him maybe making? Obviously, I don't believe he's going to win it, but do you really see him making a push for at least putting his name in the hat in the ring for maybe Rookie of the Year? Because this rookie class, outside of Anthony, like I said, out of the top 3, that draft was kind of it's a hit or miss. And and even with the top 3 right now, there's some great talent that's out there that's showing out, especially LaMelo Ball. I think he's doing great things with the Hornets right now, but it's kind of uncertain. It's kind of more of like a level playing field when it comes to evaluating rookies at this present moment. Do you think he could potentially put some heat in the fire with it, and show the league that he could be a candidate for that award?
No, to be honest, and it's a couple of reasons why he's not going to be a guy that has these gaudy numbers. It's not the role that have him playing. Maybe he averages, around 10, 12 points a game. And, the rebound numbers will be pretty good. The defensive numbers will be pretty good, but you're going to see guys with better numbers and probably on better teams too. I think a guy who's really impressed has been Tyrese Halliburton of the Kings. And the Kings look pretty good as a team. They're competitive. They could compete for maybe a spot in the playoffs as opposed to the Bulls. So that's a guy who was drawing a lot of praise, and rightfully so. When the Bulls played him, he looked like one of the best players on the court. And you're thinking, look, you're happy with Patrick Williams, but man, that kid slipped down. And think about like what he would mean to this backcourt if you had him as a playmaker. So James Wiseman has looked good with the Warriors, who again could be a playoff team. So LaMelo, as you mentioned, he's already got a triple double under his belt. Can't shoot, but he's playing lights out as far as the impact he's having on the game. Anthony Edwards again on a bad team, but he looks like he's going to be a really good player. So I don't know. This rookie class I think has turned out to be a little bit better than people thought. I think Patrick Williams can be one of the top 5 or 10 guys in that class. But I think it's a little too much to say he's going to be the Rookie of the Year, just because I don't think, again, he's going to have that flashy production numbers. And it's not going to be on a team that really, I think, exceeds expectations. And that's not always, the case you need for a rookie, because they're on a bad team to begin with most of the time when you're taking in the top. But a guy who's helping his team grow and putting up good numbers, like the guys I mentioned, I think are probably your more realistic candidates at this point. And just because – win Rookie of the Year doesn't mean you're not going to be a good player. So let's not get caught up in just the awards, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I think another player we have to add in that mix well is also Tyrese Maxey with the Sixers. I think him playing with Ben Simmons in
Yeah.
that role is gonna really help take things to the next level under that current administration. Everybody listening right now, you're listening to Josh Frydman. Josh, let's transition more. We talked a lot about the backcourt. Let's transition more to the front court because there's a lot of things you have to resolve down there. You have to resolve the Laurie Marketing situation. You got to resolve Wendell Carter and figure out what is his best, roles and skill sets in the league for him to really thrive within this Bulls system. You do have Thad Young, who's been in and out with injuries, and you have a rising young guy who showed even glimpses last year of, you know, great production in Daniel Gafford. How do you think this Bulls front court could shape up under this Billy Donovan system?
Sorry about the music there. I was trying to look up Wendell's numbers from three because obviously we saw what he wanted to do during the preseason, and it was like, okay, you're expanding the skill set, and I like it. But that's not really his game. And look, he's 21 again, a kid, relatively, when it comes to the NBA, and he's got plenty of room to grow. And that was really disappointing the way Jim Boylan used Wendell Carter, because at Duke, he was a guy who could play off play out of the high post, play out of the low post. He was a good passer. He had a shot. He was not used that way with Jim Boylan. And so I like that Billy Donovan and his staff are kind of experimenting a little bit. And, will he ever develop a consistent three-pointer? Probably not. But, at this point in his career, and this point in the Bulls' developmental stage, you want to see what it is. So, there's a lot of room to grow for Wendell. With Laurie, it's interesting because, he's already gone through a lot this season. The fact that he's had to quarantine for almost 2 full weeks. And I don't know if you heard that story about him and Archie Diacono and I believe it was Saturansky. They had to drive back. They had a driver take them in a van 12 hours from DC once they were close contacts to Chandler Hutchinson, who tested positive. And they had to basically take an overnight trip back to Chicago. And they're all in the back seat together. And they had a partition with the driver, and they had like one stop along the way. Otherwise, it was a straight trip back to Chicago. And then they had to immediately just go quarantine. And Archie Diacono said the other day, look, I was around Hutchinson, who tested positive. I was around Saturansky, who later tested positive. It was like, I was expecting to test positive. So you have that anxiety, and you can't really get out of your bedroom. And he was like, I'm in a 2-bedroom apartment. I can't really work out aside from just like doing like jail, prison type workouts, because you're just in a confined area. So you have that weighing on these guys mentally and physically. It's got to be really difficult. So how does Laurie Markkanen especially respond to that situation? Because, he's already had this chip on his shoulder because he comes in without getting the extension. I think the Bulls are probably smart to do that. You can say, hey, it's a Jimmy Butler situation 2.0 if Laurie balls out and you have to pay the guy. I don't think Markkanen's point is headed toward that trajectory. Maybe prove us wrong, but nothing over the first 3 years of his career said you have to pay that guy an extension worth $15 to $20 million. And obviously the two camps talked and they couldn't get a deal done. So it tells you right there that the Markkanen feels like he's worthy of something that the Bulls don't see yet. And I think that's fair. And again, this new regime comes in with wide open eyes, and they're not making any assumptions about these players. And they say, hey, you got to prove it, and we want to see what you can do. So I liked that tactic of putting it on Markkanen this year to say, all right, if you want that contract with us, let's see what you can do this year with our system and our coach. And so a lot is on his shoulders, and I want to see how he plays coming back from this long layoff. And yeah, I mean, look, he's got talent. We've seen it. He can get hot on the court. 3-point shooting needs to be more consistent. Can he have more of a game? They raved about his ability to put the ball on the floor and pass the ball around. Be a guy who can move off the ball more. That was something that he talked about this offseason in Donovan's system. Just being able to be active when you don't have the ball. What can you do? And so let's see that more on the floor this year. And again, you have a guy in Zach LaVine and Kobe White who need the ball in their hands a lot, who score. Is Markkanen that third guy for you? How does he fit into that system? Because let's see these. That's been the problem the past couple of years. Markkanen, LaVine, they haven't been on the floor as much together. And as a whole, this group, all the young players, they haven't been on the floor together. So it stinks. Injuries, illnesses, they happen. But if we're really going to get a true look at what this Bulls core can do, for an extended period of time, we have to see it together.
Yeah, that's very true. And with that being said, then I know you said obviously you don't believe the Bulls gonna make the playoffs. I don't either, but this could be a unique year just because of the fact that what's going on in Washington right now is that's really up in the air. And the fact that they expanded the playoff to where you got to play in. Do you think the Bulls, if they continue to progress and develop, maybe get that last spot in the play-in to where they could potentially play in, even though I don't believe they'll get in the actual playoffs, but that could potentially be a realistic situation where they can at least get to a play-in. You think they can do that?
I think it's a possibility. I think, they've shown they can compete against some good teams. You would have loved for them to steal one against one of the LA teams over the weekend, um, especially without Anthony Davis and the Lakers, having that opportunity. And they played them well. And that's kind of the point of what you want to ask for right now. But look, the Bulls team right now, 4-7. You have the Hawks, the 8th seed. They're 5-5. So obviously, you're right in the thick of things. But this is kind of what we talked ourselves into last year, right? Where you were always hanging around a weak Eastern Conference. And, you know, is that the objective, or is the objective to see who are the pieces for this future? And I think it's the latter here. So, yeah, if you can compete for a playoff team while also evaluating your squad, yeah, of course, that's gravy. But, the teams that are still in front of you, the Heat are 4-5. They're going to get better. The Nets are 7-6. They're obviously going to get better with the addition of James Harden. And Charlotte's looked pretty good with Hayward and LaMelo. So yeah, maybe is it the Hawks or the Magic? Who's the team that's going to drop out, right? The Knicks, they've looked decent and better than people expected. Are they better than the Bulls at this point? Maybe. The Raptors have been a pretty big surprise, being only 2-8 this year. So look, is it a possibility they can sniff a playoff spot? Maybe, but again, I don't think that should be the goal of Bulls fans this year.
Everybody listening right now, you're listening to Josh Frydman. Josh, what you got going on next for you, man? I know you're doing your thing at GN and the GN Sports TV show and things of that sort, but not just in your career, in your industry, but even outside of your career. Like, what you got next going on that you're thinking about or trying to get yourself into?
I'm trying to, not get into my, it's too much trouble, right? No, I mean, career-wise, things are good. WGN has been my home for 6 years now. And, sliding into the role with the new sports show has been a seamless transition. I miss doing the nightly show with JP, obviously, and having that platform, but to do GN Sports, and whether it's filling in on the anchor desk or doing stories each day, finding unique stories, it's been tough over Zoom and not having that face-to-face in-person element to go and do these stories as much. But we're all adjust life during this pandemic, and that's the number one thing, is to try to do your job by staying safe and making things work in this crazy time that we're still going through, unfortunately. So yeah, that aspect, it's been an adjustment working from home and going into the office only occasionally, but I'm blessed. I'm very happy and very lucky to still be working full time in the sports environments as well. And outside of that, had a wedding planned for last year that we had to postpone because of everything. So still engaged, still trying to get married this fall. So we'll see if that happens. Adopted a dog. So, outside of that, things are good. I haven't been able to see family too much, which is unfortunate, but hopefully get vaccinated soon and be able to take some trips here and see some people that I care about a lot. So, yeah, everything's good, man. I appreciate you asking and appreciate you having me on the show as always.
Yeah, most definitely, man. I obviously congratulations on your engagement. I know I pretty much put it out there in social media, but to actually see you in person, congratulations to you and your family, and the fact that you expanded your family so quickly with the dog. That's
My
wonderful,
fiance
right?
is a huge dog person. I grew up with a dog. I love dogs, but I wasn't sure if I wanted that responsibility yet. But I'm very happy. She's super cute. She's sleeping next to me on the couch. She's very laid back. She's a rescue, so she's kind of shy, and
Mm.
we've definitely seen her grow. And over the last 6 months that we've had her and open up a little bit more, especially to us. So that's been fun to watch.
That's what's up, man. That's what's up for real. And I'm glad you and your family and everybody's doing well and staying safe during the pandemic. Where can people follow you on social media?
Yeah. Twitter, it's Josh_Frydman. Facebook, I think it's just my page, Josh Frydman, and Instagram as well, Josh Frydman. And then the sports show is at GN Sports TV, Twitter and Instagram. So follow us there as well.
Yep, everybody listening right now, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Same name now. It's not different. I had to change the name just to make sure make sure everything is intact. New year, new me, right? So I had to change. I changed the names. It's Josh M. Hicks Media. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Josh M. Hicks Media. And Josh Frydman. It's always been a pleasure to keep in touch with you and talk to you. Thank you for coming on my show so much. I know you guys are doing a lot right now, but I got to get back on GN, man. I got to get back on the show and and talk sports, with you guys. I miss talking to you guys sports wise. So, maybe we can work things down the line where I can get back on the show.
Awesome, man. Yeah, we'll try to make that happen. Appreciate you making this happen with us and having the podcast. Best of luck with it. You're doing good things, man. Wishing the best for you. So thanks again.
Most definitely, man. Thank you. You continue to stay safe out there and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, buddy.
All right.